Greetings, I'm Professor K, and in this short video presentation we're going to see how we go about adding a Windows 10 machine to a Microsoft domain. For this particular course, I have decided that we will be using the host-only adapter up inside of VirtualBox and or VMware. So if I go into the settings for any of these machines up inside of VirtualBox and I click on Network, you'll see that I'm using a host-only adapter. I have learned that this is the easiest way to ensure that we will have network connectivity between our machines for the lab, while at the same time not interfering with our private network. In VMware, we can do the same thing. We just go into our program, and from the left Management Console window, we right-click, and we're going to select Settings on any of the machines we want to configure. We're going to go down to Network Adapter, and we're going to ensure that the machine is configured to use host only, a private network shared with the host. And you can say OK to that, and then you can close that out. And now you will ensure that you have good network connectivity between your machines. The next thing you want to ensure is that you have your domain controller up and running. Now, we have already configured this with the correct name and the correct IP address for this particular network. As we've seen in our previous video, I have configured this machine with a networking IP address of 192.168.145, and I gave it a host IP of 10. I'm now ready to join this Windows 10 machine to the same network, so I'm going to have to configure its IP addressing to the same network of 192.168.145, and I'll have to give it a host IP from the range that I reserved for my workstations between 30 and 254. For my Windows 10 machine to join this domain, it must be able to resolve the domain name to an IP address. To do this, it needs DNS. When we configured this domain controller, it installed DNS automatically, and we can go to Tools, we can go to DNS, we can open this up, and I will show you the A record or the host record for this machine. So once you're up inside of the DNS Manager console, you can just go to Forward Lookup Zones, and you can go down to your domain, click on that, and you look over here in the right window pane, and you will see that there's a host record that points over to 192.168.145.10. Now that's how it's going to find the domain controller. But it also needs to be able to find records for the primary domain controller, the PDC, and the other operation master roles that it needs to know about so that it can join properly. The records for all of these operation master roles were created when we installed our first domain controller of the Forest. So we know the IP address of our domain controller, and now we know the IP address of our DNS server because it's going to be exactly the same. This is the IP address of both our domain controller and our DNS server. You'll note that if I double click this and I go into the properties for this adapter and I click on TCP/IP4, that it refers to itself as the DNS server using a loopback address. This address is strictly local on this domain controller. It has no presence on the network at all. Its network presence is this IP address right here. That's the IP address you have to configure DNS for on any machine that wants to join the domain. Now this is very important. If we don't put in the right DNS information, then this machine, regardless of what machine it is, will not be able to find the records that it needs to be able to join the domain. Now, prior to this machine being able to join the domain, it must have network connectivity, and that's what we're going to do next. So to do this, we're just going to go over here to our network adapter down here at the taskbar. We're going to right-click, and we're going to say Open Network and Sharing Center. When this center opens up, we're going to go over to the left menu, and we're going to find where it says Change Adapter Settings. This brings up our networking connections. We only have one. We're going to right click on that one network connection and we're going to go to Properties. Once we're inside the properties, we're going to scroll on down till we come to where it says Internet Protocol version 4 and in brackets TCP/IP version 4. Go ahead and double click it. And that brings up the property windows for our IP settings. Currently, this machine is getting its IP address from the DHCP server for either VirtualBox or VMware. So we're going to go ahead and statically configure it using an IP address from our network range. So the first thing we have to do is type in the 3 octets for our networking. And that last octet, remember this is for the host IP addressing. You remember from our previous video how we went in and we allocated certain IP addresses, that is to say a range of IP addresses for certain devices. We set aside a range of .30 all the way up to .254 for all of our workstations. So I'm going to use that first available IP address for my workstations. I'm going to hit Tab, come on down. Now the default gateway would normally be the IP address for the Ethernet or the LAN interface of our firewall, but we don't have a firewall. But I do have a machine that I want it to go to for all of its information. Now I can leave this blank and hopefully it's going to be able to find the domain controller without this information. But if it doesn't, I'll come back in and I'll say, hey look, if you can't find the information that you're looking for anywhere else, I want you to go over to 192.168.145.10, which is DC1, and I want you to see if that machine has the information you need. The most important step in all of this to ensure that we don't have any issues is that we ensure that all of our machines know where to find the DNS server. The DNS server is my domain controller. So I'm going to type in the actual IP address, that is to say the networking IP address for my domain controller where it says preferred DNS. So when this machine gets ready to join the domain, it knows exactly where to go to find all the records that it needs so that it can get the information. Now once we have ensured that all the information for these TCP/IP settings are correct, we just say OK. We say OK. Close out our networking connections. Close out our network and sharing center. So we're now ready to test for connectivity between our Windows 10 machine and our 2016 domain controller. Now to do this, I'm just going to bring up a command prompt. I'm going to type in CMD in the search. I'm going to select command prompt, double click it, brings it up. Now I'm just going to type in ping 192.168.145.10. Now you'll remember that this is the IP address for our domain controller. We'll go ahead and hit enter, and you'll see that I get positive replies back. So we do know that we have connectivity between this Windows 10 machine and my 2016 domain controller. By performing this simple ping between these two machines, you will be able to save yourself a couple of hours of hard troubleshooting. Just ensure you have connectivity, and then everything else will fall into place. So we have confirmed that we do have our TCP/IP settings correct. We do have connectivity, and now we're ready to join this Windows 10 machine to our Microsoft domain. Now to do this, I'm going to go to Start, and I'm going to go to Control Panel, and I'm going to go down here where it says System. Now you can also type System into the search bar, and you can bring that up as well. Now this is the legacy snap-in for the system properties that we've seen in the past, but this is how we're going to connect this Windows 10 machine to our Microsoft Windows domain. First thing we're going to do is go over here and we're going to click on where it says Change Settings. Now before I get too far along, I want to make sure that I go ahead and have a name that I want for this machine so that when it's up inside of Active Directory, I will be able to recognize it. To do this, I'm just going to click on the Change button. Now I can change the name of the machine. So this is all part of your naming convention. So you want to make sure that you identify machines based on one of the three criteria, either location, job, or function. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this machine is part of Human Resources. It's a Windows 10 machine and it's part of Human Resources, and it is the first machine to install inside of Human Resources. So I'm going to call this machine Win10-HR01. It's a Windows 10 machine. It's located in HR, and it is the first machine that I have brought up inside of that department. I'm now ready to join this machine to the domain, so I'm going to select the radio button for domain. So for this to work, we have to ensure that we type in the entire name of our domain. In my case, it's us.cyberoffense.com. Your domain name may be different, but make sure that you use the entire name. Now, once you have that typed in, you can click on the OK button, and you should be prompted for your administrator credentials for the domain. So I've typed in administrator and the password for my domain administrator account. I'm now going to say OK, and in just a moment it should come back and say welcome to us.cyberoffense.com domain. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm going to click OK again, and now it wants a restart. We're going to go ahead and restart this Windows 10 machine, and when we come back up, we're going to log on to our domain using our domain administrator account and password. When you come back up, you're going to have another account that you can use to log on. This one is for the domain. So this is my local account, and then if I click on where it says other user, you'll see that it wants to sign me into CyberOffense. So I'm going to go ahead and just log into CyberOffense using my domain administrator credentials. To log on to a domain from this Windows 10 machine, and I have to tell it that I want to log on to a domain, I'm going to have to type in the domain name up here like so, and give it a backslash like so. And now it's going to allow me to log in to cyberoffense.com. It's now logging me in, and this machine is already registered with the domain, and we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. So the first time you're going to log a Windows 10 machine into your domain, it has to pull down all the policies, and it has to configure the machine to be a member of the domain. So that's why it's going to take you just a little bit longer than normal to log on. We're now back over onto the domain controller itself, and so I want to show you exactly what happened when we joined that Windows 10 machine to the domain. So we can go to Tools, and we can go to Active Directory Users and Computers. Now up here inside of Active Directory Users and Computers, we're going to open up our domain, and we're going to go to the Computers folder. And you'll see here that the machine has registered itself up inside of Active Directory. Now you can go to the properties of the machine just by double-clicking it. Now there's a bunch of tabs over here. We'll go through these real quick. First of all, the operating system, it tells you that it's a Windows 10 education version. And we also have the members of, the machine is the members of the computers up inside of CyberOffense. Under the delegation, you can do what you want with this machine as far as delegating it. The location, you can tell it that it's up inside of HR, so I'll go ahead and do that. I'll say it's located up inside of HR. But you can put in as much information as you deem fit. You can also assign this machine to be managed by someone. And you can also go in and configure the dial-in permissions. There are organizations that still use a modem and allow their workers to dial in to get access to servers and applications. So we're going to go ahead and close this out. And now let's go take a look at DNS. So I'm going to go over here to my tools, open up DNS, and you'll see that when we go into the forward lookup zone, and we go to our lookup zone, our forward lookup zone for CyberOffense, that we have a record now for our Windows 10 machine. This is so that anyone else who's looking for this Windows 10 machine on this particular network can find it using DNS. That's going to conclude this short video presentation on how we join a Windows 10 machine to a Microsoft domain. Now, if you have any questions or concerns about any of the material that was covered in this video or the lab, please don't hesitate to reach out and contact your instructor, and I'll see you in my next video.